Hey guys, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg, here today to do a quick reading wrap up for what I've been reading and DNF'ing so far in July. Nothing in July has really been good so far, to be honest. I have finished 2 books and I have DNF'd 2 books, but I got far enough into both of the DNFs that I am going to talk about them and count them as books that I read. I got about halfway through one of them and 200 pages roughly into another. But let's start at the beginning. The first book that I finished in the month of July was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. And this is something that a lot of people on BookTube have been wild about. I think it won the Women's Prize the year it was released, and I didn't like it. I mean, it was fine, but I really just thought it was fine. I didn't particularly love it. I didn't particularly hate it. I think my big problem with it is that I kind of thought Achilles was a jerk, and Patroclus comes off as kind of codependent for hanging out with him. I couldn't get into like their love story, and because I couldn't really get into their love story, I didn't really get into anything else about the book. I just felt very meh about it, and I got a copy of Circe, so I'm hoping that Circe will be better. And to be perfectly honest, I thought Song of Achilles was a little bit overwritten. The language is kind of flowery in a lot of parts, and there's a lot of like pulsing blood and things like that, and it felt a little too much to me, if I'm being a little honest. If you disagree and think I'm crazy, I would love to hear that. And if you think Circe's better, or if I'm going to, please let me know, because at this point I'm putting Circe way on the back burner, because I didn't quite enjoy The Song of Achilles as much as I kind of thought I would. But we shall see. Next, I started The Overstory by Richard Powers. I had forgotten that I was on a waiting list at my library for this book, and it came available. So I thought, oh, cool, I'll just start my Pulitzer Prize project with the most recent Pulitzer Prize winner, and I got 200 pages in and just completely lost my will to continue. So the first structure of the book, it goes, I think, roots, trunk, crown, something like that. So basically it works its way up the tree in the segments of the book. And the first section, Roots, is almost like a collection of short stories introducing the characters that it will loosely follow for the rest of the book. And each of those sections involves a tree somehow. And the short stories are fine. Richard Powers is a wonderful writer. He has some of his descriptions are just phenomenal. And every time it got to the trees, it felt like too much. And some of the inclusions of the trees just felt like too much. And by the time it got to the last story, where a character is electrocuted and dies, but is brought back to life by these green beings, like tree-ish, and she just starts going on a road trip at the beginning of the second part of the book, I was like, I can't. I struggle heavily with like metaphysical things, and it leaned way too hard in that direction. So because this is part of my Pulitzer Prize project, I feel like I have to revisit it at some point. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm definitely going to back burner it for a while, and I'm going to wait for an audiobook to become available. I use the Libby app to listen to audiobooks, and the audio is not available in my area on the Libby app. So I'm going to wait until it's available, and I'll try again that way. I have found that sometimes if I really struggle getting through a physical book, the audiobook is a lot easier for me. So I am going to endeavor to try it that way and make an honest effort out of it, but definitely going to wait. I'm definitely going to wait, and instead I am starting my Pulitzer Prize project with Ernest Poole. As expected, I started The Harbor, which is not a Pulitzer Prize winner. It's a supplemental read. I am starting with this one because it was the one that was published first, and some people believe that Ernest Poole won a Pulitzer Prize for his family because of this book, which was published before there was a Pulitzer Prize. So I have only read the foreword of this one so far, but this is where my Pulitzer Prize project is actually going to begin. And I'll just work my way back to the Overstory. I know Leo from A Little Book Life is a huge fan of the Overstory. So Leo, I'm sorry, I really tried, and I will try again. I just couldn't do it right now. Like I said, I lost the will. And then I was listening to an audiobook of The Dry by Jane Harper. This was recommended to me by Kathleen Merritt when I was having a bit of a reading slump back in the month of May. It was not available immediately through the Libby app, so I put a hold on it. It became available, and I started listening to it. And Kathleen, I'm sorry, I did not really get into it. I got halfway through and stopped. I think I'm going through a weird phase with mystery thrillers where they've usually been my go-to book if I'm hitting a rough patch in my reading, but I am kind of struggling with them because honestly it starts to feel at a certain point like a lot of them are the same. And I think Jane Harper is a great writer. I would be interested in going back, but something about the story just wasn't connecting with me, and it was almost like it was trying to set up a sort of puzzle box mystery and wasn't really getting there. And so it's one of those things where somebody who had to leave his hometown ends up back in his hometown. People there resent him. His friend has been killed, may have killed his family. He ends up, of course, staying and agreeing to investigate the matter and prove whether or not the friend is innocent or not. And I think part of the other thing is that as they're introducing the characters and working things through, it seemed a little unbelievable to me that he would agree to stay, and the way all of these conversations would happen, that basically he would meet people in the town and they would just catch up and talk about their lives and the crime, and it didn't quite feel natural to me. And honestly, for one of them, because I got halfway through, I worked my way through most of the introductions, and one of them I was like, I bet this is the bad guy. And when I was thinking I was going to DNF it, I did look online for spoilers for The Dry, and I was right. So I think it's not that Jane Harper's a bad writer. It's not that The Dry is necessarily a bad book. It's just that I feel like I'm going through this thing with mystery thrillers where they just feel very same and they start to feel very predictable to me. And so I think I would be interested in trying another Jane Harper book at some point. I'm just going to give it a little bit of a break as well. And then the fourth book that I have read in July, I already did a video about because I had to rant about it. That was If You Want to Make God Laugh by Bianca Murray. And because I did a book rant, you probably, if you follow this channel, you probably saw how that went. Let's just say it was not good and leave it at that. So hopefully I'm going to start turning things around. Like I said, I've only read the foreword in The Harbor right now. And I think it's going to be an interesting book. I do worry that it is going to be. So in the video that I posted yesterday about Pulitzer Prize project predictions, I said that I was not sure that I'm going to like the book Arrowsmith by Sinclair Lewis because it sounds like it's basically a thinly veiled moral argument, and the plot is basically just a construct for the author to tell you, to basically to preach to you. And that does sound like what this is, and this is very much based on real life. It's inspired by real events and real people, actual protests, and the protagonist is a stand-in for Ernest Poole himself, all of which I learned from reading the foreword. And I don't know how that's going to go. I think it seems like it's going to be interesting, but there are parts of the way the foreword talks about the book that make it sound like it's definitely going to hammer in its themes, and I don't know how that's going to go, but we'll see. But I am also listening to an audiobook. I'm about halfway through the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman by Ernest Gaines, and that is going well. I am enjoying that book. It's really interesting. She's talking about, she is a woman who survived slavery and is the book was published in 1971, I think, and she eventually joins the civil rights struggle, and she is telling the person who's narrating the story about her life, and it's just really interesting. She's a very indelible character. So I'm only halfway through. There's a lot of time for this to go downhill because that seems to be the way things are trending in July for me. But I'm feeling optimistic about it. I think the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman is going to be a highlight of the month for me so far, and hopefully The Harbor will be as well. So that's what I've been reading so far in the month of July. Like I said, nothing really good, but I'm trying to plug away and keep going. I would love to hear what you've been reading so far in the month of July, anything you've loved, anything you've hated, and as always, thank you for your time watching this video. I will be back again. Until then, happy reading.